अब डॉक्टर अब्दुल रहमान ऑनलाइन आ गए उन्होंने। आई थिंक अब हम शुरू कर सकते हैं।
जी, अब हम शुरू
जी
कर देते हैं। वेलकम डॉक्टर साहब।
मेरे
Thank you, Dr. Jem Westcott. Jem Westcott is my friend. He has been serving at MIT as Agha Professor, and he has directed several studies in urban design, Mughal architecture, Mughal irrigation, and his most important strength is the irrigation and works in the subcontinent. So he has done extensive studies, directed you see extensive studies on this particular subject. So I mean, we had opportunity to work together on the mole documentation project, which carried out in early 90s. I mean, basically, I have. Can you see the slide? First slide over here.
I just want to say that our host today would be Raza Kazim. He's an associate professor in Haripur. So
Okay.
I'll let him sort of take it forward. Thank you, Dr. Saab.
We are now starting with our book talk series online, and from the USA, Dr. Abdul Rehman and Dr. James Westcott have joined us. And if they allow, let me give us a brief introduction of both of the co-authors of this book. The name of the book being Pivot of the Punjab, which is a historical geography of medieval Gujarat, and it was published in 1993. Dr. James is a renowned landscape architect and a scholar in water management, particularly within South Asian and Islamic contexts, as Professor Emeritus, Landscape Architecture, Geography, and Islamic Architecture at MIT. His research focuses on water systems, historical geography, and sustainable landscape planning. With extensive work on water conservation, hydrology in historic and contemporary landscapes, he brings a unique perspective to how historical water management shaped urban and rural life. Dr. Westcott's research emphasizes the critical role of geography in architectural history and environmental planning. And the second author, Dr. Abdul Rehman, at that time he was based in Lahore at UAT, is a respected scholar in architecture and historical geography, especially known for his expertise on South Asia's medieval urbanism and cultural landscapes. He has contributed significantly to studies of heritage, conservation, and historical urban planning in the Punjab region. His research often integrates architecture, archaeology, and cultural history, shedding light on how historical sites influenced local identities and economies. His work provides an in-depth knowledge of South Asia's built heritage, emphasizing how traditional knowledge can inform modern architecture and urban studies. Now, together, their combined expertise in historical geography, architecture, and water management enriches the pivot of the Punjab, offering an interdisciplinary approach to understanding medieval Gujarat and its enduring significance. So, over to you two gentlemen. Uh,
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll offer some introductory comments and then hand over to my good friend and colleague, Dr. Abdul Rehman Sahab, who directed the study and is the first author of the book. It's I thank you, Raza Qasim and Taimoor Khan Mumtaz Sahab, for this introduction. Really very much appreciate the opportunity to speak at the Ustad Ahmed Mumar Center of Architecture and in the Hastunist Institute of Traditional Studies in the Arts. I've heard a lot about it over the years, but I haven't had a chance to connect with you all directly. So this is a great opportunity. I appreciate it. And also this the chance to reflect upon the volume, The Pivot of the Punjab, published some 30 years ago now. So it's almost exactly just a little bit more than 30 years, and to reflect on how those types of projects developed and what the lessons are over time is really a great opportunity. It's a chance to share with students as to how such projects are organized and what difference they can make. The Gujrat study was part of a larger collaboration that we had between the Department of Archaeology, at that time the Pakistan Department of Archaeology, UET Lahore's Department of Architecture, and the Smithsonian Institution, which was the granting, who provided the research grant to us. That project was titled Garden, City, and Empire, the Historical Geography of Mughal Lahore. And so we were thinking at multiple scales about gardens as they related to city, region, and larger imperial developments within the Mughal context in Lahore. Our project ran from 1986 to 96. It was originally designed to only be 3 years long, but we kind of spent our money well, and we spread it out over 10 years, which was quite a kind of a benefit because it allowed us to take on projects that we didn't originally anticipate, such as the Gujrat study. It was not part of the original scope at all, but for all kinds of reasons, it became very important. The core project involved a survey of, in Lahore district, of some 300 plus pre-colonial sites in the Lahore district. Only about a dozen of these were Mughal gardens per se, and they were documented very carefully by the UET team. The rest of the kind of sites that were identified were, many of them were mazars, which had the benefit of being dated and having oftentimes local accounts, people that say something about the person who was buried and then what their story was, which gave us a type of a depth of understanding of localities within Lahore that was largely not recorded in textual documents. So we learned a lot from that type of very detailed local survey methods to gain insights into larger places and their local histories. At one point in the study, it was a conversation with Dr. Safar Rehman Dar of the Lahore Museum. And I don't know how many folks in the student cohort will know of Dr. Dar's contributions, but you should write down his name as someone who published a lot of very important work on cultural heritage of Pakistan. And he mentioned that he had conducted a similar surveys to what we had been doing in Lahore district, in Sheikhupura district and Gujranwala districts. And I don't think he ever published those works, but they too are valuable compilations of kind of local site-based knowledge traveling out the Grand Trunk Road. So we said, okay, we're really excited about this method, and let's try it again. So let's go one district out to Gujrat. So that's the story. If you ask why Gujrat, that's part of the story of it. Work had been done in Lahore and Gujranwala, Sheikhupura. So he's like, let's go to Gujrat, following the Grand Trunk Road west, and conduct a field survey of historic routes and places. Now, like the Lahore district survey, but a little bit more systematic, it employed what sometimes is called a snowball methodology. And a snowball is where you go to one place and then you ask people, well, what other places are nearby? And they tell you, well, there's A, B, C, and D. And each one of them say, oh, there's A, B, C, and D beyond this. And then you learn about all kinds of local places that might not be part of any major compilation and would identify particularly places that are very small and local significance. These mazars being a good example that one kind of learns in that fashion. In the Gujrat case, it was a more structured survey, looking at specific areas of the district because it is a larger scale, and but using then some of the same methods out in the field. And that led to a organization of the volume by routes and sub-districts or sub-regions of Gujrat district, starting with the fort and town center, and then following the GT road out westward, emanating north to what we call the Gujrat, this Kashmir side, and then south to the southern routes through the district as well. The UET surveyors filled out detailed forms for each of the places identified, no matter how small, and asked questions and just would keep asking probing questions to get a sense of what's the story of this place, past and present. And then the book project Dr. Rehman and I had was to say, how can we make sense of all this local knowledge? And what was this place? What is this place called Gujrat? And we considered three different ways of thinking about it geographically. And the first was to think about, Gujrat as a contiguous geographic area, as a space, and as a political space, an administrative space, which it has been from Mughal times, at least Mughal times onwards. And this approach reminded us of something that developed later, colonial period, as what we call gazetteer tradition of writing. Gujrat has a gazetteer. All the districts have gazetteers, and they describe in a relatively brief form what the district's characteristics are. Now, that approach was developed in colonial times as a way of introducing district officers who rotated frequently, as they did from Mughal times onwards, to their new places of work. And we were very critical of the types of applications of the gazetteer method for colonial administration. And so we weren't trying to emulate the political aspect, but in terms of the structure of having a comprehensive perspective on the district, we said, okay, there's something to be learned from the gazetteer while being critical about its use, because we thought a modified gazetteer approach could help systematically and culturally introduce a wider reading public in Gujrat and Punjab more broadly to the area that they call home. The second geographic perspective is to think about Gujrat not just as a area, but as a functional region of routes that connect markets and local centers one to another, like a network. And the network extended out to Afghanistan, north to Kashmir, west to Lahore, south to Sindh. And that functional perspective was what led us to think of Gujrat as the pivot of Punjab, in which the main GT road, northwest, southeast, connected to the northward road to Kashmir, points south. And we said, wow, it's fascinating how this district is the place at which these routes connect different regions of South Asia. The third, and I think probably the overarching geographical perspective, was to think of Gujrat as a culture area, defined by constellations of sacred spaces and places. These places were part of the larger Mughal cultural system of Delhi, Agra, and Lahore, to be sure, but they also had much deeper local cultural significance. And we felt that was oftentimes lost. It's not part of everyday discourse as to the extraordinary cultural breadth and depth that occurs across Punjab, and that one finds through a study of its myriad mosques and mazars and baulis and stories. So we wanted to take that perspective. Now, then what the book does is try to bring these different ways of thinking of political space, of functional connections, and of culture dimensions, and to bring them together into some coherent and integrated account. And we came to believe that that was possible. We wanted to demonstrate it was possible in this book and to use the book as an example of how this process could yield an account of an area in Punjab, and that could be understood holistically and lead to a deeper appreciation for those also who lived and worked in the area and who would want to know about this. Well, those are some of the recollections that I have from the project and what made it such a great collaboration with Dr. Rehman, who led the study, and I'm interested in hearing his thoughts about how the project evolved in his reflections on its kind of lessons he learned from it as well, and the discussion that follows. So thanks again for including me.
Professor Wescoat, that was very useful, the way you summarized your conceptual framework. I think that's fascinating, in fact. And I wish everybody would take all these various layers into account when studying such historical spaces, because history is still alive. It's there. Not just the buildings, but the stories and beliefs, so on. This seems to give a more appropriate presentation of whatever one is studying.
Well, while you're working, Dr. Saab, I'll tell one story about this account, because in the UET, a lot of the students were doing fantastic work with us. And some of their parents would say to Dr. Rahman, now, why are my students going out and looking at all these unusual places like no? And at the end of the story, the parents were as excited as the students by this type of inquiry, even though they were skeptical at first.
Can you see the slide now?
Yes, we can see the slides now, Dr. Saab.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we divided our study into 7 chapters. The first 2 chapters, Dr. James Wescoat has given you some introduction about the geography importance of that area. First of all, I would like to tell you that how we proceeded with this study. Actually, we started with some basic research work, and we consulted all the official histories of the Mughals and before the Mughals, like the history of India as told by its own historian, the official history, Baburnama, Akbarnama, 𝐺𝑒𝑒𝑒𝑐𝐞 and others, as well as the local histories. So these histories gave us a lot of information about the different areas, about different villages, about different trade routes. And first of all, we did this whole spade work, literature survey, which that what kind of information we have on this particular subject about the Gujarat. Okay, next important thing was that we started collecting all the geographical informations from different sources, from Library of British Library, India Office Library, and we also found quite useful information like route maps and what these route map describing places like Khwaspur beyond Gujarat, near Lala Musa, and these settlements don't have that kind of sarais because in the history that has been mentioned. They no longer exist, but the area, the history that is preserved in these kind of maps, and the third type of information we collected is the travelogues. The people who traveled along this trade route in different period, um, uh, and they provided quite useful information while following those footsteps of those early travelers, British travelers. We also find certain monuments which they have described in their own, travel history. So, first of all, we take, for example, the first thing is that we take the eastern part, which is the Kashmir route. I mean, this Kashmir route was very frequent during the Mughal times, and as they traveled along the GT road, from GT road, they used to go towards Bhimber and then towards Srinagar via Pir Panjal. And we find that on this particular trade route, there were also a number of sarais which were built by the Ali Mardan Khan and others. And also, there are some historic mosques as well on this particular route, built by Shah Jahan and others. But these uh, monuments are in very bad condition. For example, you can see in this particular slide, which is uh, Sarai at Bhimber, and only this gateway is surviving. Now, basically, we divided this study into three parts. The first part is I mean, as I mentioning that this is the Kashmir route. The second one is the Grand Trunk Road, and the third is the the third route is the Kadrabad Rasool route, because route was followed by Emperor Akbar. So in these three different routes, then there are sub routes which connected different cities and different places with one another. Okay, so this is um a mosque. This is a beautiful mosque in its own time. This was constructed by Shah Jahan. This is slightly beyond Bhimber, and it still preserves beautiful fresco paintings, but is very neglected. You see, there is no conservation plan which is in place, and I mean, things are getting worse and worse every day. In between the Bhimber and Gujarat, there is a tomb of a saint, which is said to that the Emperor Akbar visited that tomb and he prayed, and as a result, Jahangir was born. Uh, so his prayers were accepted over there when he prayed at that particular. That saint is known as Sheikh Aladad Siri. Right. So this is, I mean, there are important, at but that particular time, Mughal time, there were quite important saints which were, you see, located in different areas throughout the town, as Dr. Saab has mentioned, that this is the important cultural history of the area. Now, you can see there is another sarai which is in beyond the Bhimber area. This was also built by Ali Mardan Khan. And this is also in very bad condition. I mean, most of the wall has fallen down. And these are the kind of things which we discovered initially in our, but since this was a part of the Kashmir area, so just we are going to mention this one, as this was not fall in the Gujarat district. Okay. Then there is a route between, on this same side, there is a route between Kharia and Sarai Balolpur, or river crossing near Sialkot. And that has been mentioned by Emperor Babur as well, the village of Balolpur, right? It means that that town was built, small settlement was built during the Balol Lodi period. Now, this is a large site. This is very close to University of Gujarat. When we visited, this area was barren, and only this particular sarai, you can say that is for the travelers, as well as Baradari. And there are few tombs. You can see on the right side, there is a green tomb, which is tomb of Hafiz Ayat. And there are smaller tombs of the early Sikh period. Now, The most interesting thing is that this area, this particular tomb was built during the Jahangir period. And uh, the entire land surrounding this area was granted as a Jagir to the saint to serve the traveler who are visiting this area, as well as, to spread the message of Islam. Now, the most important thing is that in this particular area, there were 7 wells, historic wells. Okay. And one of the well had inscription as well. Uh, so, I mean, after the construction of public school over there and University of Gujarat, all those wells, were filled up, and now there are no remains of these wells. So the most important thing is that we have not taken care of our the history by preserving all the important, the important architectural element which is in the jurisdiction of these important sites. Okay, we have only, in some places we have only preserved some few important building, but the landscape which is around that area, which enrich the or which increase the importance of that particular site, we have ignored that particular aspect. Now, next one is next route is the southern route. I will come slightly later to the main granting road. The southern route is, as I mentioned, that this is Kadrabad and Rasool route. This was frequently used by Emperor Akbar and later Mughal period, because that route originated from Lahore and goes to Sheikhupura, and from Sheikhupura that goes towards this Hafsabad, and from the Hafsabad they used to cross the river. And this particular, you see picture on the right, you can see that it is still being used as a river crossing, and the people on camel bring, this different items from one district to the towards the uh, Hafsabad area. The important thing in this one is that we cross the river Chenab, on foot. And at one place, the water was near our nose level, and we are about to drown. You see, that was the biggest mistake we did, during our survey. But eventually, after crossing this one, we reach to Kadrabad, and you can see slide on the left side. There is a beautiful tomb of Qadir Khan. Uh, and this is a brick, Fairface. This was constructed in Fairface brickwork. Uh, at that particular time, this was standing alone, but later on, it was, covered by a lot of construction. And this is one of the most beautiful monument in our history. Some people try to demolish this one to construct a new one in order to gain some money. But this was mentioned by Dr. Saifur Rahman Dar again, which Dr. James Wescoat has mentioned, that he visited on my request this particular tomb so that this can be repaired and preserved. But he mentioned that somebody was, uh, um, pulling it down so that he construct a new tomb. Now, this is an important site in terms of architecture. First site in the Gujarat district. Now, this particular site is located in Mandi Bahauddin district. When we undertook this study, the Mandi Bahauddin also was part of Gujarat district. So, next important site is this Mangat, which is next to Mandi Bahauddin, which is close to Mandi Bahauddin. And the Mangat has a beautiful Gurdwara, which was built during the Ranjit Singh time. Now, this is another important cultural site where the Sikh pilgrims, they come and they visit this particular place. Uh, Close to this one, Mangat and this area, we find another important Akbar period site, which is tomb of Sheikh Ali Beg, which is on the right. Uh, and this Sheikh Ali Beg tomb is important in two respects. Firstly, that it is one of the earliest Mughal period tomb uh, built during the Akbar's time. And the second is the calligraphy, which is written on the walls. Uh, and these are the Persian, this is the Persian poetry, which has been taken from different poets. The other important thing is that there is a special kind of fresco paintings which are painted on the spandrels of the arches. This particular site has two important. One is the tomb. The other is this unknown monument, which is located close to this tomb, and it is believed that this was also a tomb because this is not facing towards the west. And it was initially we thought that this might have been the mosque, but this is not a mosque. It was a tomb, another tomb in this area. Now, this area was the this is close to Phalia, and the Phalia area is important from the Greek history. That people says that the Alexander the Great came here, and his famous horse Bucephalia was from this particular area, and therefore this town was known as Phalia. From here, we crossed the river Jhelum, and we reached to, you see, while we were studying the Aine Akbari, we studied that the uh, Emperor Akbar stayed at Baghamali and ordered the construction of a garden. So, looking that particular, you see, text, we found out this particular Baradari or gateway, or you see on the right, you can see in this particular slide. And this was an important discovery in the sense that Akbar built very, very
Um, I think we lost the connection, maybe.
I mean, we can wait for a few moments. I'm sure we can.
Dr. James, did you accompany them during these documentation times, or when these photos were taken? I'm not sure when these photos were taken exactly. Uh,
The photos would probably date to around 1992, some of them, but I think Dr. Rahman went back and became the head of the architecture department at University of Gujrat, so he would have had a chance to revisit places. And to answer your question, I went out on several of the times when I was coming to follow along with the progress being made. But the real extensive field research was done by the UET team.
Because looking at all of this, it just makes me think that if a version 2 of this was brought now, so that would really change the whole dynamics, and at the same time, a very good comparison between what has happened in the last 30 years.
You're absolutely right. You know, restudies and reevaluations of earlier projects aren't done too often, but when they are, they're enormously valuable. So that type of reinvestigation would tell us what's happened and what new knowledge has developed, but also what lost heritage has occurred.
It would be a great opportunity if I think, because I'm learning a lot of new things right now, and I think not many people know about this Phalia that they said about Alexander's horse, and I recently came across this as well, and I was uh, dumbfounded that okay, there's so much going on that we don't realize, even though I've been to most of these places myself, and particularly photographing, doing a lot of photography around there, but still I didn't know about this.
Yes, it's such a seems to be such a rich. There were buildings which I didn't know about that Dr. Saab was showing, and I think this can be one. Rizwan Saab, your name is Rizwan Saab from Gujarat.
Rizwanul Haq.
So we on and off we make these heritage trips. I think our next one would be Gujarat now. So we'll be looking to your help in that.
First of all, sir, I'm thankful to all of you people, Professor Raza, Kazim, Professor Wescoat, Professor Abdul Rehman, and your good self, please. तो सर क्या मैं उर्दू में बात कर सकूँ?
जी जी, आई थिंक प्रोफेसर वेस्कॉट काफी समझते हैं उर्दू।
ठीक होगा, फिर तो ठीक होगा। तो सर जो अभी मेरे भाई रजा काजम साहब सर,
जी
तो उन्होंने जो बात की है कि इसका नया एडिशन जो है वो आए, तो मैं उसी वक्त सोच रहा था अगर इसका नया एडिशन आए तो मेरी तमाम सर्विसेज इस नए एडिशन के लिए अवेलेबल है, कि हम जो है वो इसके लिए अगर इसका नया एडिशन प्रोफेसर साहब वो उस्ताद हैं जी, हमारे दोनों प्रोफेसर साहब, आपका शुमार भी हमारे उस्ताद में होता है, तो अगर वो इसमें करना है तो मेरी जो रजा कराना हिदमात हैं वो जनाब अली जो हाजिर हैं हमेशा 24/7 वो हाजिर है। और सर ये एक जो किताब है, मैं इसके बारे में थोड़ी सी आपकी इजाज़त से डिस्कशन करना चाहूँगा कि इसमें कुछ चीज़ों को जो वर्ल्ड सिटी गुजरात है, अगर इसमें मतलब कुछ असल में जितनी चीज़ें वही इसमें बयान की गई हैं जो मेन उन रस्तों पे आती थी। तो अगर हम हेरिटेज की बात करें तो गुजरात का जो काफ़ी हेरिटेज है वो इसमें गुंजाइश है, मैं कि इसमें नए एडिशन में इसकी काफ़ी गुंजाइश है। अकबरी हवेली है जहाँ पे अकबर की रिहाइश थी। उसके बाद जो गुजरात फोर्ट है, गुजरात फोर्ट के बारे में आज तक मिसकम्युनिकेशन है कि गुजरात फोर्ट जो है वो किस जगह पे वाक़या था, उसकी कितनी थी, उसका मतलब कि रकबा या उसकी वो रेडिएशन कितनी थी। तो मैंने अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह गुजरात में उसकी जो रेडिएशन है वो देखी है, उसको पॉइंट आउट किया कि इस जगह पे गुजरात फोर्ट था जो अकबर ने तामीर किया था। और उसके 12 जो बुर्ज हैं वो भी, उसमें से इस वक्त तक जो 6 या 7 बुर्ज हैं, 6 और 7 जो हैं वो मौजूद हैं, और रिमेनिंग जो है वो ज़माने की नज़र हो चुके हैं। जो अभी बात जी, और रिमेनिंग जो है वो ज़माने की नज़र हो चुके हैं। उसके अलावा सर मुग़ल इरा के काफ़ी यहाँ पे जो हेरिटेज है मुग़ल इरा का और सिख इरा का, वो काफ़ी ज़्यादा यहाँ पे मौजूद है। इसके अलावा इस किताब में अगर हम कुछ चीज़ों को मज़ीद की भी इसमें नए एडिशन में गुंजाइश है सर, कि जो आपने अगर एक पंजाबी सेंचुरी का अगर आपने मुतालिया किया हो, एक पंजाबी सेंचुरी बाय प्रकाश टंडन, एक और उसका बाद में उर्दू में तर्जुमा भी किया गया था पंजाब के 100 साल। तो अगर किसी साहब ने वो पढ़ी हो तो उसमें भी जो गुजरात का अंदरून गुजरात है उसके हवाले से काफ़ी जो है वो चीज़ें बताई गई हैं। इस किताब में जितने बिल्डिंग्स का के बारे में बताया गया है, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल जो टाइटल पे है, ये अगर मैं आपको टाइटल दिखाऊं, आप शायद देख पा रहे हैं ये टाइटल, क्या टाइटल डॉक्टर साहब?
गायब हो जाता है।
गायब हो जाता है, एक मिनट। तो अब सर
जी
नजर आ रहा है जी, शायद
जी जी।
रिफ्लेक्ट। तो सर ये टाइटल, अच्छा अनफॉर्चुनेटली ये जो सबसे ऊपर वाली है ना जी, ये 2005 का जो अर्थक्वेक था उसमें ये चीज खत्म हो गई है,
ओ
ये जो सबसे ऊपर वाला है। लेकिन
हम्म,
ये जो सर, ये जो बुर्ज है ना सर, ये वाला, बाकी ये अभी तक सलामत है। और मैं उन लोगों की अप्रेजल करना चाहूंगा जो लोग इसमें रहते हैं, कि सर वो यूं कह लें कि सफेद हाथी को पाल रहे हैं, कि ये इतनी बड़ी, मतलब ये इतना ये बिल्डिंग खर्च मांगती है, लेकिन उन वो लोग इस बिल्डिंग को बहुत ज्यादा अच्छे तरीके से मेंटेन कर रहे हैं। इसका रकबा तकरीबन ये अगर आप देख रहे हैं तो
ऊंचा
तकरीबन
करें थोड़ा।
ये टाइटल पे जो ये
जी जी जी।
जी, इसका रकबा तकरीबन 6.5 मरले है। अब डॉक्टर साहब को अगर आप एक्सपीरियंस, 6.5 मरले का इसका रकबा है, और मैंने इसको अंदर से सारा विजिट किया है। जो है ना वो इसके अंदर मैं 3 दिन में मुसलसल जाता रहा हूँ, इस पे मैंने विजिट किया है। और ये कंप्लीट मुगल इराक है सर, ये कंप्लीट जो है वो मुगल इराक है। अच्छा, अब एक वाल ये आ रही है, टाइटल की पे हम बात करेंगे, ये वाल आ रही है, ये वाल जो है ये भी इस वक्त मौजूद है, ये वाल इस वक्त मौजूद है। उसके अलावा सर हम बात करेंगे, एक जो चीज है, जो हम प्राइवेट्स में जब आए हैं, तो जो हाफिज हयात पे डॉक्टर साहब ने बात की है, हाफिज हयात कैंपस में जो बिल्डिंग्स थी वो वाकई वो जो सर वो खत्म हो गई है। उसके बाद डॉक्टर साहब एक बात कर रहे हैं, अम, काफी सर जो चीजें हैं इसमें, अब वो जैसे रजा काजम साहब ने कहा, तो काफी चीजें वो 3 डिकेड्स के बाद जो काफी चीजें हैं वो खत्म हो गई हैं। तो सर आप लोग कुछ पूछना चाहेंगे गुजरात के बारे में?
Maybe Dr. Westcott might want to ask something. Otherwise, this seems to be very promising for art. Anybody who wants to go with us and with Rizwan Saab to visit Gujarat and hopefully to add to or do some whatever is
It sounded
necessary.
like there were a lot of good ideas for a new edition and further developments that have happened, or there's always corrections to be made.
The researches and the books required for research, especially even during my time in England, in America, it was a big problem for me to actually get my hands on anything connected to my own culture or heritage or nearby areas. People would think that the only thing to focus on is the Lahore Fort, and that's all that remains, because that's the image that's there. And the other one, if you really want to go out of your way, would be Rohtas Fort, and that would be the end of it. And not realizing that the Doab that we studied now, and that Gujarat being the pivot, so this opens up a lot of opportunities that just by, I mean, it's not necessary we use um, all the options that we have by like 3D scanning, etc. But we just by photographing it now in some orthographic photographs, and now we have drones. We can get the contextual views, especially with the drawings and the presentation that I saw, and those illustrations in which it was made, a master plan was made. Having that perspective, having that overlay would really enrich and give it a very visual uh, enhancement as well. So
Yes. And the fact that you've revisited these places recently and taken new photographs of them, that would be really valuable to make that comparison.
What we found is that when we do our heritage walks and then it goes on social media and so on, it goes a long way towards preserving these sites, because now people have become more conscious of their own heritage because of this new internet exposure and so on. So this is also an opportunity.
इशू सर ये है कि माइग्रेटेड फैमिलीज जो हैं वो उस हेरिटेज बिल्डिंग्स में रह रही हैं, और वो कंजेस्टेड जगह पे बहुत ज्यादा ओवर पॉपुलेटेड है। इस वजह से सर सारा हेरिटेज जो है ना वो सारा हेरिटेज तबाह हो रहा है। ये बात है सर, ये प्रिजर्व करना इसको बहुत मुश्किल है।
प्रिजर्व करने से मेरी मुराद थी कि जब लोगों को आगाही होगी ये कोई खास चीज है, कोई अच्छी चीज है, तो
जी
उससे ही, ये जरूरी नहीं है कि उस पर कंजर्वेशन प्रोजेक्ट हो, मगर उसे
जी
कोई तोड़ तो ना देना. नोबडी शुड, पीपल विल बी केयरफुल नॉट टू पुल इट डाउन एटलीस्ट.
Basic awareness.
जी बेसिक अवेयरनेस की बात तो है जी. कुछ लोगों में है जो जो टाइटल पेज पे बुर्ज है ना जी, जो टाइटल पेज है जो पिवट ऑफ द पंजाब इस किताब का, इसके अंदर जिस फैमिली की सर रिहाइश है, दे पीपल आर सो डिसेंट पीपल कि वो इस उन्होंने इसके अंदर एक भी नई ईंट नहीं लगाई. उन्होंने इसको कंप्लीटली रिस्टोर किया है. तो गुजरात की ये वाहिद एक बिल्डिंग है जो कि कंप्लीटली मुगल इरा की है और वो मुकम्मल तौर पर रिस्टोर्ड बिल्डिंग है. तो
अमेजिंग
अगर
जनाब.
This was supposed to be a talk about a book, but it's turned into something, a snowball effect, as you put it, is now in effect. So I think this was a very healthy session. And Dr. James, I think we would like to stay in touch with you. We will reach out and we will email you. And the information you said before the session about the research that you wanted to, that you were kind enough to share with Taimoor Khan Mumtaz, if I would also like to be looped into that. And thank you for your time, and your expertise and your vivid recollection after 30 years. So, and thank you everyone else for uh, watching. And I hope we have another session soon.
inshallah, inshallah. May I ask to Dr. James Westcoat, sir, how many times you visited Gujarat?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to. It's hard to count, because every time going up and down the different roads, and we would try to go not just along, certainly not the motorway, but the not along the current GT road, but we try to find the old routes. The ones that went through Ahmedabad and all these different alignments of the GT road. And so that was, but that was a part of it. But I think Gujrat stands out as really one of our major kind of unanticipated
Sir, next
studies that we were really fortunate to be able to do. Really,
oh,
we were very inspired by the place and the people
thank you, sir. Thank you.
as part of it. So. We'd hope to do the volume with that in mind and be worthy of it. But you might notice who the publisher is.
Yes.
That we we wanted to produce this very quickly in time for the 1993 symposium in Lahore. And so Dr. Rehman was very creative. He went to Urdu Bazaar. And the printer said, "What do you want to say?" And they said, "Well, this is for friends and among friends, so let's call it Dost." And so Dost Publisher, I think, has only produced one book. This is it. But it was the right idea. Anyway, that's another story that I wanted to share with you all.